Hello, it has been over a year since last time I mentioned the settings of ray tracing in ReShade. Once again, I will be using Assassin's Creed Black Flag, and we'll be doing the usual steps to install it in the first place, once again, as a reminder, because this needs to be repeated over and over and over if the chat history of Pascal Gilcher's Discord is anything to go by. First step, ReShade.me. You go to download. You want 491. This is currently the latest version. Later on, there's going to be new versions. And as with every new version, always try to stay updated to the latest version if you can. Then, once you have that, you will want to be subscribed to Pascal Gilcher's Patreon. It is currently in the beta at $5 per month. To access it, you can also pay it once, grab the files, and then stop your subscription. Do remember that at the beginning of every month, Patreon will charge your account. It doesn't matter how long you've been subscribed for that first month. At the first of every month, regardless of the time that first month was, you will be recharged. So buying within the first 10 days, that's pretty good. But if you buy like on the last of the month, that's not necessarily a good thing because you're just going to be charged another $5 the day after. But what you can do is also subscribe, go to the Discord in the beta access, and grab the files that you want, then unsubscribe from Patreon so it doesn't recharge you. Just do know that the way Patreon and Discord is linked, you will be automatically removed from the beta access role on Discord. That's just how it works. It's not Marty's fault, or it's not Pascal's fault. It's Patreon's fault. Get angry with them. That's just sadly how it is. There's also, tutorials and videos, and there's my depth videos here about ReShade and 5M, ReShade with ENB. If you have other videos and you're in the Discord, you can always ping a mod and they will help you out with that. So anyway, $5 on Patreon, link to your Discord account, you get the beta access channel, and this is where all the latest ray tracing stuff is. The latest one is 20.1, and you want to use ReShade 491. With that out of the way, we'll have your files here. So ReShade, you want to run it. I'm going to be using Assassin's Creed Black Flag. If you want to do it manually, you can always hit the browse button. Your Steam apps, common, blah, blah, blah. There's Assassin's Creed Black Flag single player, because it has a multiplayer, but who the hell actually plays that? This is a DirectX 11 game. It's gonna think about it for a few seconds or longer. There it is. Update. If you already have it, it'll say update. If you don't have it, you won't have that option. It'll just install it. So I want standard effects and some sweet effects. You can do Quince by Marty, sure. Let's do that. I like Otis effects because there's also a cinematic depth of field in that. It's really good. I like it. So CAS is contrast adaptive sharpening. It's an AMD sharpen that was ported to ReShade. FXAA, SMAA, because we're going to want anti-aliasing in post. In-game anti-aliasing with a depth effect will cause a blurred edge. We don't want that. What do I want from Quint? Let's do Bloom, D-band, yes. Depth of field, yeah, we'll keep that. I don't need MXAO, we're doing RTGI. Sharpening, we've already got a sharpen. SSR, don't need that. And the only thing I wanted from here was the cinematic depth of field, because I like it. It's pretty good. So I'm just going to edit. Yeah, I show my frame rate. I can skip the tutorial. If you want to know about the tutorial, watch the first video. I've already talked about that. I'm just going to skip it. When you run that, you will have a folder called ReShade-shaders. I'm going to go into my RTGI stuff, 20.1, shaders, textures. Click over here. We can drag it, replace. Do not touch it anymore. You have installed it. That's all you needed. Now I'm going to start Assassin's Creed Black Flag. Okay, so we get in the game. We can see there's not much going on. Let's start with this. If it has a yellow message, you can ignore it. It's just a warning. Marty knows about it. Don't worry about it. It's not an error. It's just a warning. You can turn it on. Whoops. Well, this doesn't seem right. And that's because we have the wrong depth. Just going to drag that down there. Display depth. This is our depth buffer. We don't want that. That's wrong. Well, this is just the usual steps. I put a video about this, but I'm going to just run through it again because people kind of suck at paying attention to things. So, let's see here. Can I use anything here? Nope. There's no character here. Don't want that. Okay, so we have MSAA on. We don't need that. That's broken. Turn that off. Go to menus. As always, just turn off anti-aliasing if you're using any depth-based effects like RTGI or even the depth of field. That would break as well. Home button by default. If you did a fresh reinstall, turns that off and on. You have your settings here. It's the home button. One thing to also do is save before and after images. I'll show you that later. But for now, going back to display depth. Sometimes you need this one. There it is. Copy depth before clear for Assassin's Creed Black Flag. This is not going to be applicable to every game, but that's just what works for this one. There. This is our depth buffer. This looks correct. We can do show both. There's our depth. There's our normals. It's working. Turn that off. Turn this on. Huzzah! We have lighting. Now, what I like to do is right-click it, left-click on this one, and I like doing numpad 1. Assassin's Creed doesn't use the numpad, so I can set that to a toggle. So now I can only toggle RTGI on and off. And I can do other things like bloom, and this is going to look like shit. But if I only tapped 1, I am only turning RTGI on and off. If you want to turn everything off and on, you can go to Effect Toggle. Scroll Lock is usually a good one for that. It was a default before, but then they removed that. So now I can turn everything off and on. I can turn everything. I can do just ReShade. I apologize, I realize that is very flickery. So anyway, that's a bunch of junk. We're only caring about RTGI. Oh yeah, also remember that if you have it set to disabled, pressing 1 isn't going to turn it back on. You need to make it's yeah, it says here, effects are disabled, press scroll lock to enable them again. Now they're on. Always good to know your hotkeys. Makes things a little bit easier. So with RTGI, I'm going to shrink this down. Leave that open. These will not be on by default. So I'm going to turn those all off. This is your bog standard default RTGI. Got some lighting over here, ground to box. You have shading inside the trees, but I don't like how this looks by default. Maybe you do, maybe this is your cup of tea, but it is not mine. So what I like to do is these are all pretty good by default. I'm not a fan of backface lighting because, for example, this rock is in shadow, but because of backface lighting with how bright the front is, it thinks the back is the same. So if you turn that on, now there's more lighting going on the back side. But I don't like that. It's usually not accurate enough for me to like it. Ray fallback is an experimental option. Let's go to lighting channel. And what it does is it looks for potentially... Now, this is just me spitballing here. is it looks for potentially missed lighting rays, because with our length of 4, let's just leave it at 9. It looks for things that are potentially missed, like there was a ray shooting off, but it didn't hit anything, so it's going to assume a color or a shading to it. I don't know the full math behind it. I think it looks pretty good, so I'm going to kind of leave it on. I'm going to leave it on. There is this new setting, Extended Ray Length Multiplier. I like that all the way up. Increases ray length in the background to achieve ultra-wide light bounces. Now, it looks like we've missed some stuff in the background, but that's okay. It's fine, because we can just shrink this. Because if you put extended ray length up, you want the base ray length down. Now, this doesn't have to be 50. It can be up to wherever you need it to be, because, for example, I'm looking at this light bright ground here to the rock here. Going to extend that up so the rock's nice and covered. There's also light coming from the rock to the ground that we can see bouncing around here with this line. Just gonna put that up. 2.5? Yeah, 2.5. Now let's go 3. This doesn't look too bad. A nice bright light going up to the tree there. Pretty much what I try to do is I find something that's tall or super bright, and I want to go like a full screen bounce. So let's go back to none. So we can see that's not looking too bad. This is just a constant tweaking and change for me. For example, maybe I like it more when this cave is more filled in. Like, it's actually decently filled in at the settings right now. So lighting channel, you can see that it's got covered up. We got the light coming up here. It's looking pretty nice. Yeah, because we don't want it too small. Now that's not being filled in. That's being filled in pretty good. So 3 wasn't too bad of a guess. Another thing to consider is the Z thickness, because you don't want things haloing too much in the ambient occlusion pass. Although what I use more often than not recently is just the bounce. Because if the bounce looks about right, because you can see that even as I increase and decrease, things are filling up, but there's also shading going in, thanks to the precise light spread. It counts as like a shading type thing. It's real nice. I love it. It's good. Just going to turn that in until things look shaded right. Generally, you actually don't want to go too high. Like I wouldn't really want to go over 50, even though 50 looks pretty good right now. It's also got shading in the back here. See, 24, that's too low. It kind of just glows through whatever this is, which is rocks. It just kind of glows through that, and then you turn it up and it blocks it up. And this is a more precise type thing, like I don't want to use 50 if 40 is okay. Other thing too is, like, there's a tree back here and you can see a sort of a shading here. Let's turn up a little bit of ambient occlusion, like 1.5-ish, and you can see it kind of getting filled in over here too. Like, you got to think about one thing. You should probably think about what's realistic. We also got to think about what looks good. Because like 50 kind of fills it in a bit more, but 40, it still fills it in most of the way. And there's also this shadow around the main character to consider. Because you don't want that to be too much. It's going to be unavoidable, basically. So for Black Flag, 40 seems pretty darn good. You can also click up here and drag the window around If you want it full screen, you can click on there. If you want it like in the top half, you can put it there. You can put it there. Or you can just leave it hanging in the middle for, you can put it over here so you can see your full screen. Maybe there's something over here, something left screen. You can move it. It's pretty cool. Useful to know. So for now, I'm just going to leave it there. Put this away. And from here, you just kind of start tuning in your lighting and occlusion. Turn that off. So I was going to look for, like, this isn't too bad, this rock here. Because you got the light from the sand going up to the rock. You have foliage over here for shading in. And you just start with, let's start with ambient occlusion. Because what we don't want this. This, to me, is bad. It is too dark. I do not like that. We gotta consider how bright it is, right? Consider the sky, how much ambient light there is. And we only want to darken it a little bit. You know, it's like a tasteful darkening. So like, yeah. 2. 2 is pretty good. Now I just put in some lighting. Move that over there a bit. What we don't want is this. This is too bright. You want the color up here to match the color down here. For a realistic approach. See that? That's, yeah, 2 and 2. That's not too bad. You can toggle it to look. That's looking pretty darn nice, if I do say so myself. Now what you can also think about doing is, because this gets dark, and then this gets brighter. But this is also looking very washed out. Although I think the game just gave it some, like, cloud, so... See, this is too much. 10 and 10, that's too much. 10 and 6, though. It's a more contrasted effect, but 10 is still too dark to me. So let's go with 5. Yeah, maybe just try 5. 5 and 3.5. Yeah, that's not too bad. There's still a lot of darkness around his chin. But this brings up another issue. I'm going to go to the options because the game also has HBAO on its own. Because what we're doing is we're adding ambient occlusion on top of ambient occlusion, and that is bad. That's what I don't like. So I can turn that off. Motion blur. I don't like motion blur. Anti-aliasing's off. Okay. There we go. Now that's not too bad under the chin. Now it's only RTGI shading, so you're not adding darkness on top of darkness. That's not good. That's the base settings, at least. It's not too bad. You can see here, this is a glowing object. It should be casting light. You can see it glows as it goes around. But since it's already, you know, decently bright here, you're not really going to notice it much. This is like already full screen because it's doing all this light around here, all this light around here. It's just, it's very bright here. So in general, you're not going to notice this much of an effect. Like you can see it here. But in general, that's too much. Yeah, it was around 3.5. Alright, I messed with my settings too much. I'm going to change that again. Go back, so back to 0. Shade that in. It's a click and drag, so I'm just kind of doing what I think looks right. Actually, 5 wasn't too bad. Yeah, why not? We'll do 420, blaze it. Bring this back up. You can notice the effect here again. That's pretty good. 3.5. I want to turn it a little bit darker. Well, I'm back at the settings I was at. Alright, cool. We'll leave it. Fade out start, fade out end. That's mostly just how distant you want it to apply it, so you'll see it back here. You got to consider the environment fog too. Like, you don't want it too close because then it turns off. And you don't want it too far because then it doesn't necessarily blend well. Especially in foggy games. Oh my god, foggy games kind of suck for this. Because ReShade does not know that fog exists. ReShade doesn't know that. This looks pretty good. And it'll just apply the shading over top of the fog, and it just looks awful. So we don't want that. We can use your fade out start and end. You know, if it gets foggier, you can bring it in. If it gets clearer, you can take it back out. It's not. This is not a one size fits all. It really is not. So in this one, we have Preprocessor Definition Guide. Tells you what infinite bounces do, tells you what the sky color does, image-based lighting, fade-out mode. I never really touched that. Material type, this is where your surface reflections is going to be. Half-res input, and smooth normals. So I wanted to run through that. Fade-out mode, I don't touch. Like, this just works fine. Put it back to 6. Half-res input. Unless you're struggling for performance, does it show on the stream? It does not. I'm running about 46 FPS here. So, it's going to be a heavy hit. So let's just turn half-res input on. For reference, right now I'm running 46 frames per second. I am now running 50. It went back down a little bit. So 50 frames a second. This is a 4 FPS increase, but it has a chance of doing like some flickery bullshit apparently. Like, you can see it's got noise. That's just unavoidable everywhere. Like, especially for these tiny flickery, this tiny grass. It's gonna be flickery. It's gonna be noisy. There's not really much we can do about this. And half-res input, I think, just kind of makes it worse. So you can see the noise in here. I usually don't use half-res input. See, it's still noisy here. This doesn't, it fixes nothing. It's just a little bit of frame rate improvement, but eh. What is interesting, though, is what we care about, the smooth normals. Although I think it's kind of smooth already. You can see there's edges around the jacket. See if I can get closer on the camera for this. Okay, so we can kind of see it. We can see it here. There's a hard edge right there where the jacket is, the actual geometry for the jacket is. We can turn it off and we can see that, you know, it's kind of rough there. But what we can do is smooth that out. Turn smooth normals to 1, and that didn't smooth as much as I thought it would. Whoops. Let's turn that off again. This model might actually be high-res enough that it doesn't matter. I'll have to find a game that's more low-res, like maybe Final Fantasy XIV. A bunch of older games will do that. It seems kind of smooth by default, I think. Yeah, this looks kind of bad here. All this geometry here, and if we turn that on, yeah, it's smoothed out now. Okay, so that's a good example there. That was smoothed out. The rocks maybe. Turn that off again. Yeah, the rocks kind of a little bit smudged and smoothed here. Turn that on. A little bit more smooth. You don't really lose anything by turning it on, to be honest, so you can leave it on. Sky color mode is another one that I like using. So I'm going to just wheel myself back around here. Standing in shade, shadows is good for this one. Because what you want to use sky color for is filling in shadows. And find a little shady spot. Here we go. Here's a shady spot. So with sky color mode, what this helps is you want to. I put it to 2. I have always set sky color to 2. So this looks kind of, you know, bad and bright. By default, the intensity is at 4. We don't want that at 4. We want that at like 0 for now. And then we just start bringing it in a bit. I like putting saturation up to about 3. The max is out at 5, so I like going kind of middle of the road approach on that. Sky color can go up, because you kind of want the sky to fill in the ambient color. That's the idea behind this. Like, it doesn't have to be too much either. Just enough for that little mwah kind of touch. So like, I don't know, 60, 69, 70, yeah. And then we can also do sky color ambient mix, where it bleeds more into the color of the ambient occlusion. Turn the debug to see what it's doing. What it looks like it does, though, is it just brightens up the ambient occlusion, which you might not necessarily want. This one just colors the outsides. This is like coloring the inside. So you want I feel like you want a little bit of color, and the default 0.2 is good enough. There you go. Let's say at 50. Yeah, this isn't too bad. Looks kind of nice. A little bit off and on. Take a look through the cave, maybe. I don't want to do that. This isn't too bad. You got the color from this water is pretty bright, so it's going to take the color and kind of bounce it on other people, on the rocks. Going to shade in here, all the way back here. This is going to be mostly shading, except for the water, which is, you know, unrealistically bright in the game, but it takes what the color is on screen and puts it everywhere else. That's how this shader works. That's not too bad. But that is just adding sky color. And what it does is it looks for the farthest distance out here and then applies it as like a downwards type color. And for different shots, maybe you don't want 50, maybe 130 is good for this, because you want more of that outside light kind of bouncing in. Because again, it's not always a one-size-fits-all situation, depending even on your camera angle, because maybe 1.3 works here, maybe only 0.5 works here, or maybe you just want it 0, maybe you don't want it at all. What's next? Material type. This is the big one that most people are looking for. You can turn it to 1. And what it does is, by default, you don't see much of a change. But you have these 2 new sliders here for roughness and specular. So specular controls how bright and shiny the world is. This applies to everything. This isn't like a material definition thing, because ReShade cannot figure out the materials. ReShade does not have that information. It will, I can't say never have that information. There's apparently something in the works to be similar to like ENB. But as a global thing, it does not have the information and applies this material to the entire world. So specular is how bright things are, how shiny and how shiny it is. Not necessarily how reflective it is, but it's how shiny it sees the world. What this basically just means is it controls some global illumination intensity. Now what roughness is, this is the reflection bit, because we turn it all the way down and everything gets super shiny and reflective. So if you want like a mirror world, you turn this up, this down. So everything looks super shiny. Maybe not the best intended effect, but that's just how it's gonna look. Let's go here, lighting channel. See the tree kind of reflected there. Yeah, it doesn't let you go beyond 0. What this can work for is some games have very metallic environments. And you can see the reflection of the turtle right here. There you go. Turtle reflection. Turtle reflection, tree reflection, and it's applied to everything. The turtle's reflective, the ground's reflective, the tree is reflective. The only thing that's not reflective is the sky because the reshade doesn't reach that far. So some places, some games have very metallic environments, and this would be fantastic for those. But for a game like Assassin's Creed Black Flag, where we're dealing with sand, we're dealing with leaves, we're dealing... Like the water, that would be reflective, but since we don't have the material information for water, you might as well go with the general environment. Rocks, trees, leaves, sand, cloth. It's all very not that reflective. It's not to say that it isn't reflective. So I'm going to save specular for last because, let's see, roughness. It's not going to be full rough. Everything in the world has some reflectiveness to it. Whether it looks like it or not, that's just physically correct on how it works. So let's go to, say, 85. Just a little bit. Now we want to change the specular about 25 doesn't look too bad. This is all just a lot of trial and error. You want to play with the settings. You want to see what looks good, what looks correct to you. So this, about 15. That looks about correct. Now, I know this is a very long-winded thing, but this is just going over every setting and talking about it in as much detail as I know. Not necessarily as I can, but it's as I know. Because I don't necessarily want to just, bullshit through things, but at the same time, I'm also kind of bullshitting through things. Welcome to how I do things. I like playing with stuff. Maybe we want 25 instead of 15. Because we still like this little glowy effect here. It's very nice. Turn that off. Turn that on. It's looking pretty stellar. Maybe a little more ambient occlusion. Yeah. Like that. It's nice. Oh, that's right. You're probably noticing it right about now. But one of the downsides of materials is that it causes, in the rendering world, we call them fireflies. Because they're bright, and they're shiny, and they happen on the tiniest little fidgety things. Where's my mouse? Like here, and over here. You can see it kind of specular popping around, unless compression has decided to absolutely screw this video over, in which case maybe you won't see it. There's these little speckly lighting bits, and that's because of the reflective materials. And again, it's kind of unavoidable. Like this, that's hella noisy. You can see them everywhere over here. But this is because of reflective materials mixed with very tiny, like, pixel thin objects. It's gonna happen. It's unavoidable. There's only so much that you can do with ReShade. Because we don't have a temporal anti-aliasing, that's not possible. ReShade doesn't have the motion vectors in order to properly do that without appearing like a massive blurry mess. So if that's not your if that's too distracting for you, turn your material type back to 0. But even then, it's not going to fix everything. That's just the reality of how this is. It looks good, but it's not perfect. It won't be, since it's not a native implementation. What we can try to do, though, is smooth it out. Although first, there's still 2 options to do. Infinite bounces is one. Again, you turn it on, it gives you a new slider, and there's not much change going on because let's look at the lighting channel. Because what it normally does is it bounces one object to one object and one object backwards. But what it doesn't do like a bounce from one onto something else. It's only a single bounce. And this doesn't even make a physically correct actual other bounce. The performance doesn't support that. But what it does do is it's like an approximation from what I remember it being described as. So it's like an indirect illumination additional fallback type deal. But what it means for you, the end user, for the non-technical bullshit part, is that it just basically adds a little bit more global illumination. That's all it does. Sometimes you want it, sometimes you don't. Keep it on for the point of this video then. Let's see here. Sucks. Yeah, I'll keep it at 1. And the other one is image-based lighting. I'm going to turn it back over here, because I think what I'm looking for this time is on Edward here himself. So you can see that there's a much more dramatic effect on this. What I believe this is doing is taking the general screen color and casting more rays out from the camera itself, because as you can see it's happening on his front, not necessarily inside here or on the back. It's on the trees as well. It's a very forward facing type effect based on the general color of the screen. Now sometimes this works pretty good, like you want a little bit more forward because we know that off screen there's a lot more green. Everywhere's kind of green. In situations like this, the effect works pretty well. Where is my mouse? Likes doing that. So like, 40, there we go. But even then, that's a bit much. Maybe a 10%? Because the way I like doing things is, I don't like going too overboard. Like I said, it's always that little chef's kiss, that little mwah, just that tiny bit that adds all that we need. That's pretty much all the settings for RTGI now, and this is like, I realize that this is now a 40-minute video. I'll have timestamps and everything, but there was a lot to go through. There's a lot of improvements, a lot of differences. It's been a year of development. This is a lot of stuff. Because you always want precise lighting spread. It just creates shadows inside the global illumination. And creating shadows is just, it's so good. I might need a better example to show it off. Because it's easier to see the shadow stuff on, well, I mean on densely covered objects like this. You see it cast the actual shadow from here instead of being bright and glowy. It shades in the grass, and like it doesn't even, like there's no performance in it. In fact, it's a small performance gain, like maybe half a frame to turn that on, so keep it on. Alternate intersection, this is more like an SSAO type sorry, intersection. This is the alternate intersection test is a more accurate. And I like my accuracy, so always keep that on, keep that on. Ray fallback, it's not too much of a difference, but see if I turn it off. Yeah, having it off is a little more, it gives you some more frame rate. I think you can see it up here. This is at 40 FPS. Sometimes it says 41. I turn it on. It goes down to 38, 39, so it's like a 2 FPS. I can't use FPS. It's got to be a frame time, so it's a small frame time difference. Sometimes it looks better, sometimes not. This is up to the end user. And then, of course, at the end of it, we're just going to do some SMAA. Just makes it smoother. Maybe some FXA too. Why not? All the sub-pixel count. And roughly, let's see. Yeah, that's fine. 24, 4, yeah, there we go, good. Turn this off. And that's basically it. I'm going to be tweaking this a little bit more again because I kind of rushed through this. Otherwise, I'd be taking well over an hour. You'll never, just remember, you'll never really be rid of this noisy grass. It's unavoidable for the most part. But that's basically it. We have ray tracing settings. Again, long-winded. I mostly apologize. Partially don't because, well, I mean, not many people are going to watch this and just be like, oh yes, this is how this works. Some people are just going to ignore it all, and then I will be sad. Because people just want the quickest thing possible. But I can't explain everything in the quickest way possible. Sometimes it's just, I can't. People gotta know. Anyway, I hope this was enough information to shove into your brains. And I don't know what video I'll make next, because that kind of covers it until like another year from now. So yeah, bye.